Hello everyone, and welcome to this month's lesson with Law Photography. I am Stephanie May, your instructor, and today I'm going to be working on a photograph of myself, a self-portrait that I took last fall, as an example to show you what I do to retouch an image. Because Halloween is inching closer and the days are getting shorter, the air is getting crisper, I decided to pull out one of these shots from my self-portrait session at the Black Monarch Hotel in Victor, Colorado. This place was so cool. I'll flip through just like a few shots. These are unedited pictures that I took last year when I was there. It's supposed to be a haunted hotel in an old mining town in the mountains of Colorado. It was a weird place. I mean, each room was serial killer themed and decorated with very, gorgeous, gorgeous colors, tones, textures. And this bed that I was lying on for these shots was actually a floating bed. They had it suspended with ropes. So it was pretty tricky to get these photos, but I'm really pleased with the way that they turned out. I decided that this shot in particular would provide a good example for how I retouch portraits. So I'm going to start by just looking at the image as a whole. I can see that I definitely am going to have to fill in, I'm going to do some dodging in these areas, which I'll probably do some of that in Lightroom. Right now I have the image opened in Photoshop and I'm going to do the skin, hair, nail retouching, and then I'll go into Lightroom to brighten up these dark areas that are underexposed. So I'm kind of taking stock of this image as I look at it for the first time in about a year and paying attention to what I think needs to happen to make it look perfect. So I always start with skin retouching. In this, I have makeup on and a wig, and you can kind of see here the wig doesn't quite connect to to my hairline in this area. I also didn't give myself black eyebrows for this photo shoot, so I need to go in and fix that. I'm going to do some wrinkle removing, some blemish removing, and removing of stray hairs. I'm also going to clean up this area around my lips, and I'm going to try to change the color of my fingernails. I should have just painted them black, but for whatever reason they were hot pink at the time, so I'm going to go in and change those. And yeah, you can kind of see my process as I go along. So what I'm going to do to start is to duplicate the layer. I don't really like to work on the background layer because then you have to go into your history panel and hope that you have enough steps back to get where you were before. When you make a layer on top of the background layer, you're basically providing yourself with a chance to kind of step back in time through masking and through opacity changes. So whenever you're working on retouching in Photoshop, I suggest making a layer. And so now I'm going to go in with the patch tool. The patch tool is in the retouching area here under this particular panel, which is the J shortcut. So when I hit J, it brings me to this patch tool here. I have it selected on patch tool because that's the one that I use the most. If you're hitting J for the first time, it might take you to the spot healing brush tool, which you can always go in and select directly with the patch tool. So I'm also using alternately the Z shortcut for zooming. Zooming allows you to get in really close, which is necessary for high-end retouching, as well as moving out to get the bigger picture of the image. So when you hit the Z, it provides you with this magnifying glass, and then you can click and drag on your trackpad or using your mouse to make the image larger. So I'm going to hit J again to select the patch tool, and I'm going to start just by removing some of these smaller areas of discoloration here on my skin. You may also notice that I'm using this hand tool a lot to move around the image. The hand tool can be automatically utilized by just hitting the space bar. So if you have J selected for the patch tool and you need to move to a different part of the image, you can use the hand tool by pressing the space bar. So I'm just going to go in and start evening out this skin tone. The patch tool is really handy. I mean, and anybody is going to tell you when it comes to Photoshop, there are, so many different ways to get the effect that you're going for. So while I use the patch tool, somebody else may use the healing brush tool to get the same effects. I just have, I learned by using the patch tool, and so that's my go-to. I really don't ever use the healing brush tool. I will go in and use the clone stamp at some point, and I'll talk more about that when I get to it. But for now, I'm just going in and sort of cleaning up these areas here. And you get used to doing this. I mean, it can be pretty meditative, to come in and just do these repetitive selections. So when you're using the patch tool, you draw a circle or a shape that connects on both ends, and then you drag it to another area, and that basically patches over the area that you selected. So I'm going to step back here in my history panel because I didn't really want that. I just wanted to show you how I do it. So for example, this wrinkle right here, I'm going to try to just select around it, and then I'm going to drag it up to this spot, and I'm going to see, yeah, I like that. I like that. It leaves a couple little areas here that I still need to clean up, which is fine. I can go back in and do more detail work, but just kind of circling around the entire blemish. I think I'm going to leave that mole. Actually, I might make it darker. But just circling around the entire blemish or wrinkle that you're trying to get rid of, and then moving it can sometimes be the fastest way to edit out, anything that you want to remove. You can use this tool to edit out chords from a photo, or if there's something, on a wall behind you that you want to remove, the patch tool is a really great resource for that. So I'm just going to keep going in, and anytime an area catches my eye, I feel like it's distracting me from the overall shot. So that's how I decide what to remove and what to leave in. For this shot, I want it to be very polished. I want it to be flawless. So I want people to focus on the vibe of the shot and not really any distractions such as these blemishes that I'm removing or even these stray hairs. The patch tool is really, really good for removing stray hairs. I'm going to go in and do this carefully. If you feel like you've made a mistake, but you're not quite sure how it's going to look, you can always go over to this layer 1 and use the eyeball, click it off, and then that will show you before and after. I'm also going to hit right now Command 0, which is going to back me out of the photo and give me an overall view here. So Command 0 will give you the image in the full screen, and then Command plus and Command minus will zoom in and out for you. So now that I'm zoomed out here, I'm going to probably just come in a little closer here on the face, and I'm going to turn this off and on to see how I like where I'm at so far. This looks pretty good to me. Yeah, I feel like I'm making good progress. I definitely want to minimize this area. I'm not sure if removing it completely is going to look too fake, or if I want to add some back in. So for now, I'm going to leave it, and then we will come back to that spot, because I'm probably going to do some masking in this area. I don't want to remove too much of the shape from my images, because if you remove too many of these shadows, because wrinkles or just the way that a face is shaped, it's not necessarily a blemish, right? It's just the way that the light is hitting the skin, and I don't want to remove too much of the detail, because then it just doesn't look real, and people can tell. Even it's like an uncanny, you might not really know what's wrong with an image when you're looking at it, but there's something about it that kind of doesn't quite look right. And when an image is over retouched, that's kind of the vibe that I get. Now I'm going in and really working this image because I'm showing you all of the detail that you actually can get in here and change. On an average image, I might not do this much specific work, but you know, and you might notice too that I'm just kind of like, I just kind of go around the image. I start with the face usually and the hair, and I'll go around the image and just whatever catches my eye next is whatever I will retouch. Right now I'm also working on a borrowed laptop, which is challenging because it doesn't have the same functionality as the one that I'm used to, so the trackpad isn't as smooth, which does make it a little more difficult for me to do this. Unfortunately, I spilled water on my laptop and it is not fixable, so in the meantime, until I'm able to purchase another laptop, I am just using this borrowed one. It's not too bad. It works pretty well. Okay, so I'm digging this. I think this looks pretty good. I'm going to go in and do some clone stamping in this area. You want to be careful when you're using the patch tool in an area that has a lot of shadows. For example, let's say I want to remove this here. Now, you could try to draw a circle around this and move it over. So you're not going to want to move it down here because that's going to lose the shape of the collarbone. You'd want to move it so that it sort of mimics the collarbone here. And that's not too bad, but the collarbone is supposed to end here, and because the hair covers up the end of the collarbone here, if I pull the patch tool over, then it looks weird. So let's zoom out and see. Yeah, that looks like the collarbone actually doesn't belong there. So I'm going to go back. I don't think that this is a really good example of where drawing a circle around an entire area that you want to remove doesn't quite work. And to be honest with you, because the end of the collarbone here is covered up by the hair, I may not be able to actually remove it. So I might just try to minimize it using the clone stamp, which I will get to that tool next. Right now we're just going to work with the patch tool. Now I'm kind of working down into my arms and my hands. And I have freckles, so I've got, you know, quite a few freckles here and some stretch marks I'm going to remove. And for my hands, this is another area where you don't want to remove too much, right? Like you can take some things out because you don't want the veins to be too distracting. I have some scarring here on my hands from surgery that I had on my wrist, so I just took that out. These areas here, I don't know. You might see what happens. Let's do that. See, once it's gone, it's like it doesn't look right. So I'm going to come back to the hands and probably do them all at once. I feel like I can at least use the patch tool here a little bit. I'm going to come back later on the hands and do some masking. I'll probably use the patch tool and then use a layer mask to get some opacity on these edits so they don't look so flat. So yeah, I'm just going to go in here and kind of clean this up. Sometimes you might notice, like right here, when you use the patch tool, it can blur the edges in a way. Like for example, you can see this just takes all detail out of it. Sometimes the blurred edges, you just have to kind of go back in and fix those. Now, if it doesn't bother you, then don't worry about it. You know, I am very meticulous when it comes to retouching. So, and like I said, I find this process meditative. So for me, I can come in and kind of get lost in this process. And the more you do it, the more you get familiar with the, you know, the hotkeys, like, you know, using the shortcuts and stuff. So this is the area around the collarbone that I was working on earlier, and it, instead of being able to select around the whole thing, it looks like I'm really going to have to go in here and just meticulously move this around. So because there's shadow and shape here, I don't want to lose that. And sometimes you just kind of have to play with it. Like instead of bringing this down here, I'm going to bring it up here where it has some similarity with the shadow effect. This spot is going to be the tricky spot, but let's just see what happens. Sometimes you got to just go in and do it. You know, it might not look the way you want it to at first, but you can always step back by using your history panel here or by going into your layer and using a layer mask. So I can tell from this point on that this is too dark up here for me to actually use the patch tool with any success. It's going to start looking blurry, kind of like these edges do right here. And I'm going to come back in with the clone stamp to clean these up. So I'm going to come back to that area. For now, I'm going to look at the image as a whole again. Let's check the rest of my skin that's showing. Let's maybe remove some of these hairs here. Just gonna try to clear some of these out. You can also use different tools to do this same job, you know, and you may find that using the healing brush tool works better for you than the patch tool. It really is just a preference of what you like when it comes to retouching. I may not remove all of this hair, just some of it. Still have a few of these out here, these stray hairs, and they'll look fine. Yeah, that little bit of stray hair there is going to be all right for now. Okay, so let's come back in. We still have this area that I'm going to try to clean up using the clone stamp. I'm going to use the clone stamp around the lips here, and I'm going to use it on the hair to fill in the bangs as well as this hairline. So let's start with the lips. So with the clone stamp, the shortcut for that is S. It is the clone stamp tool, which is right here in the palette. Clone stamp, basically, you can use the bracket buttons on your keyboard to make the clone stamp larger or smaller. And the different settings, you know, are going to make a difference here. So you want the hardness to be all the way down to 0. I believe that's the default, but just in case, you don't want the edges of this to be hard. You want them to be as soft as possible. And then you'll use the option button, option click, to select the area that you want to clone. So for example, I'm trying to get rid of this redness here around the lips. And I'm going to sample this area right below it, option click here, and then I'm going to come up and just fill this in a little. Zoom in close. I'm going to use this tool to basically fix my makeup. I think I had on red lipstick before this in the photos that I took before this setup, and that's why it's bleeding over like this. So yeah, I'm just going to use this clone. You see me switch back and forth between the clone stamp and the patch tool, which is typically what I do. I'm going to come in here. I don't want to lose too much of the shadow, but I just want it to be very clean around the lips here. I might even make my lips a little bit bigger. I'm going to see how it looks after I do this part. And you can see I keep sampling from different parts and then going in. And that's because I don't want to sample from here for over here. See what happens when you do that? I don't want to do that. I want to sample from right around this area so that it blends in. You can kind of think like the clone stamp is kind of like a blending. And so when I see something like this that needs a more exact tool, I go in for the patch tool. When it needs a broader, more general retouch, I go in with the clone stamp. Okay, so let's do the hairline up here. Let's start with the bangs. I did like this wig. Really cute. So I'm sampling from the bottom because I want the bottom part of the fringe here to be, you know, to be echoed. So by selecting what's close to it and then drawing it, I'm basically tricking the eye into believing that there wasn't an issue with the bangs of this wig. I'm also going to fill in this part, which I think this hair here is my like blondish sort of brown hair, and I want to cover that completely. I'm probably going to end up covering my earlobe as well. So I'm going to make the clone stamp bigger, and let's try this. I'm going to start from up here, come over, and then I'm just going to draw it down. I want to fill in here. There we go, that looks pretty good. Now that I have fixed the area around the lips and retouched the hairline here, I want to come into this spot and see what can be done. So I'm still working on the same layer. I did not duplicate this layer again, which you can do. Like, you can have a layer of just your patch tool edits and then a layer of all of your clone stamp edits. I usually keep all of my edits on the same layer because I want to be able to go back in and change it. So I'm just carefully here using the clone stamp to remove these areas. And if, let's say skin just gets it can get very muddy very quickly. So let's say I'm going in here, I'm going to kind of clean this up a little where these hairs are. Still leave a few so that it doesn't look too smooth. And you can use just the edge of that clone stamp so that you're not using the whole thing. And then you can also sample from the hair portion and draw some of this back in. That looks pretty good, I feel like. Yeah. Now watch this area. I'm going to turn the layer off and then turn it back on. Yeah, that worked out. And see, we have the end of the collarbone here, which I sort of had to build. And it just takes practice, the more you do it, the better you're going to get at it. Like I said, sometimes I'll go in and I'll just start to notice little things and I will fix them. I certainly will go in and do like a high level of retouching like this if somebody's going to print a canvas and have it on their wall, or I know it's going to go into a magazine or be viewed large. Not every image needs this much detail work, but we're going to do it for this one so that I can kind of show you my process. And who knows, maybe I'll end up hanging this one on my wall and giving it to my partner as a gift. This area is looking kind of funny. So when I see areas that just kind of look a little distracting, I just go in and see if I can make it even. Another good tip with the clone stamp is that if you have a strap like this that has a hard edge, you can put it you can put the clone stamp tool right in the center of that, and if you see it, see how it's changing as I move it? That's because it's giving me a preview of what I already sampled. Since I hit Option click right here, it's giving me a preview of what will happen if I draw using that particular sample. So I'm going to go back in and kind of use this to draw the edge here. Looks pretty good. And now, some more detail work here with the patch tool. We're going to just kind of try to make this less distracting, which I feel like we're getting there. You also have to be careful because you'll start to see repeating lines like this and this here, and it doesn't look like much, but it catches the eye in a way that, again, is sort of just subconscious. Yeah, I think that did work. Okay, so I think my next step is going to be working on the hands and this fold next to the nose here. These are the areas that I was mentioning that I want to do a layer mask on. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called stamp the visible layers to create a third layer, and you do that by pushing Shift, Option, Command, E, and it does a stamp visible. So now I have a second layer here that I'm going to use for layer masking. You can actually go in and name your layers too. If you just click on it, you can change it. So here I'm going to do, let's see, patch and clone. And then here I'm going to do layer masks. So let's zoom in on the hands here. I'm going to just go ahead and remove the veins and make them completely flat. So this is the benefit of using a layer mask, is that you can kind of go in and over retouch and remove that detail like we were saying before. You don't even have to get too specific in here. I'm going to just like take out these veins because I'm going to go over here to this layer mask, my third layer here, and I'm going to click add a layer mask. And it's going to add this. I'm going to go over here and click on add layer mask. The layer mask allows you to use either like a black brush or a white brush to add and subtract from what you have on this layer. So right now the only thing that I have on this layer are these hand edits. So I'm going to use my brush tool. You hit B for brush. I'm going to use the bracket tool to make it larger, about the size I need it. And then I'm going to go up here to opacity and I'm going to do 50%. So I'm going to draw, and then I'm also going to make sure that the black color is in the foreground here. So black will mask the edits that I just did. So let's go in, and there we go. Yeah, I'm just using this 50% to draw in a little bit more detail on the hands. So that looks great. Yeah, I like that. Okay, so now I'm going to go up to this fold next to the nose. I'm still on my layer mask layer. I'm going to select this. Oops, actually the reason that didn't work is because I'm selected on the mask layer and I need to be selected on the image layer. Like I said, I do feel like that looks too retouched, so I'm going to go back to the brush tool, which is at 50%. Oops. Now that happened because I'm on the image layer and not on the layer mask layer. So I'm going to go here, click on layer mask. I'm at 50% up here, black selected, and I'm going to click, and that's going to add just a little bit of that detail back in. Now that looks good to me. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the retouching part of this. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with the retouching part of this for the skin at this point. I am going to go in and do some color correction and I'm going to work on the eyebrows, and I'm still going to be working on these fingernails. So I'm going to show you how I do that. First, I'm going to flatten it because I feel good about where I'm at here. I'm also going to save it. So I'm going to create a new layer by using this button here. And as you can see, this when it has this gray and white grid here on the image preview, that just means that it is like a clear or transparent layer. There's nothing on it. Like basically it's like laying a piece of clear plastic on top of your image. And I'm going to use this layer to draw in some black eyebrows for myself. I'm also going to go in and change the blending mode here for the layer. So right now it's on normal, which, you know, most of the time people are just going to be working on normal. But when you need to draw on top of something, and I mostly use this for like brightening the eyes, changing the color of something, you know, brightening skin or darkening in certain areas, I'm going to select multiply here on the blending mode, which multiply will darken it. So I've got my brush selected. I'm on black. I am at 50% opacity. I'm going to just make sure that I'm as soft as I can get here, which is true. So 0 hardness. I'm going to zoom in, and then I'm going to use the brush to draw in the eyebrows. Don't be afraid to like step yourself back. If you do something and you don't like the way it looks, you can hit Command Z, or you can go into your history panel here to step yourself back. So I actually don't mind that. Come here, create myself a nice little eyebrow. I'm not trying to get it too perfect because I'm going to go in and adjust this. So let's just see how this looks. So to kind of do a better job here of blending this, I'm going to go over to the opacity here and I'm going to drop it down to 50. That looks pretty good. So that's 0. This is 50, 60, 70, 80. And it's just getting too much at that point. I feel like you can still see some of the hair here at 50%, which I feel good about. So I'm going to put my brush opacity back up to 50 to do the other eyebrow. I'm going to come in here and draw that in. I should have just done a black pencil when I did my makeup, but I just forgot. Sometimes that happens. So go in and fix those mistakes that we made when we were getting ready for the shoot by using Photoshop. And I feel like this could be a little darker through here. All right, that's pretty good. So before and after with the eyebrows, I'm gonna use a layer mask again. So I'm gonna add a layer mask to the eyebrow layer. I'm gonna go in, since I'm selected on the layer mask and I'm using a black brush here, I'm actually gonna move this up to 100 and I'm gonna try to see if I can clean up these edges a little. I want the edges to be more perfect than they are. Yeah, that works. Okay. All right, let's zoom out. That looks good. I'm going to flatten it and I'm going to step back and actually color in my mole here. So I'm using the same technique that I used for the eyebrows. I have, the new layer with the mask, and even though I don't think I'll need to use the mask for this portion, I do have it there. I'm at 100% with my brush and I'm on black. So I think I'm going to try to have it be more of like a brown. Select a brown. So to select a different color, you just go over here to your foreground color and then you use this color picker to choose whatever color you want. So I'm going to do a little bit of a brown. Well, that looks pretty good. Oh, I actually really like that. That was easy. Okay, just one click and we're done. Okay, so now I am going to flatten it and I'm going to work on this contouring. I'm going to create another layer. I've got my brush selected. Instead of having this brown color, I'm going to go in. While you can use this color picker to pick whatever color you want, I want my color to be somewhere in this area. So I can just come over here and click on it. So I'm going to use this color. I'm going to drop this opacity to 10%, which just, means it's not going to draw like let me show you at 100%. Yeah, we don't want that, right? So I'm going to step that back, drop this to 10% here, and then I'm just going to see what happens. I'm going to kind of draw a little more contouring on. And like I said, you can kind of go over the top a little bit. I kind of want a darker color than that. And then you can always step it back. So that is way too dark. So I'm going to change the opacity here of this layer, and I'm going to use a layer mask with the black brush selected. I'm going to change the opacity to about 50%. So one of the things I'm noticing is that the catch light here is really clear and bright, and then the catch light here, not so much. And that's one of those very subtle things that can make the image look unbalanced. Again, some people may not notice it, but my years of retouching, it definitely stands out. Use the clone stamp to select this catch light and move it over to this eye. So I've got my clone stamp selected. I'm at 100%. I'm going to hit Option, click here, and then I'm just going to put that same catch light right there. Perfect. So I also would really like to brighten my eyes in this shot. Anytime you're using the clone stamp or the patch tool, you want to be working on the image or on a copy layer of the image. But anytime you're drawing on top of the image, you want to use just this new layer, this sort of clear layer. I'm going to go into the blending mode here, and I think I'm going to do soft light. I do not use all of these by any means whatsoever. I feel like I tend to use multiply, screen, and soft light more than anything else. You can experiment with these different ones, but those are the only ones I'm going to talk about today. So I'm going to select my brush by using the B. I'm going to swap my foreground color to white because I'm going to brighten my eyes here, make my brush smaller. I'm going to put the opacity of the brush at 20%, and then I'm just going to go in and draw some lighter colors in the eye. Oh, that looks so much better. Yeah. Now I have a blue selected, and I'm going to go in here. Oh, wow, that is like turquoise. But it looks pretty good. I mean, I'm looking kind of ghoulish in this photo, so I don't mind taking it to like an unreal level. I do that. And then I'm going to go to a much darker blue and draw this outer line of the eye. A small little detail there, but it's very effective. Next, we're going to work on these fingernails. So I think I'm going to start with an adjustment layer. You come down here to your layers palette and click on this button, which is like a circle that's half white, half black. And I'm going to click on hue and saturation. It brings up this little panel here. So this probably would be considered magenta. When you come into the hue and saturation, you can select different CMYK colors. And I'm going to come into magenta, and I think I'm just going to take the saturation down. Okay, that's kind of working. You can kind of see it if you look at this little pinky finger right here. If you watch what I'm doing when I take the saturation all the way up, it's kind of clipped actually. It loses the detail, but it's not doing too much. And when I take it down, it's not really removing any of the color here. So I'm going to leave this saturation at 0, and I'm going to come into red because I have a feeling, oh yeah, there it goes. It's picking up way more red. So I think I'm just going to drop it down to -50 for now. And what that will allow me to do is sort of paint over it. So we're going to leave it at that. And see, when you have an adjustment layer like this, it automatically creates a mask for you. So when we come out, you might notice that I just took all the red out of the photo, not just on the nails, because I have the whole background selected here with this adjustment layer. And now that I'm looking at it, I really don't mind that all the red is gone from my skin because I'm really wanting to have a more pale look. I don't really like the background as much without the red. Oops. So it looks better before on the background, and so does the broomstick. So right now, what I'm going to do is go back in and paint all of that color in using this layer mask. So I've got the brush selected. I'm at 100%. I'm going to use the bracket to make the brush larger. And then I'm just going to use the black on the foreground to paint that back in. So now that I have got the saturation down on the fingernails, I'm going to flatten it again onto the background, and I'm going to come in and paint on top of these nails. So I feel like orange would look good. I don't think that I'm going to be able to do black. I might be able to get gray out of this. Black is just such a dark color that it's really not going to, I don't think it's going to work, but we're going to experiment. So I'm going to go down here. Since I'm painting on top of the layer, I'm going to create a new layer, select the brush, go into the color palette. I mean, why don't we try black and just see what happens? I mean, really, that's what color I wish it were. So I've got the opacity at 100%. I think I can leave it there for now and then change the blending mode here to soft light. So the blending mode on your layer allows it basically lets it blend. So instead of it just being like a dark color without any detail, the blending mode allows it to blend in with what's underneath it. So it helps you retain some shape. No, that actually, it's not really going necessarily like a dark black, but to be honest with you, I feel like I need sharper edges on my brush. So I'm going to step this back, and then I'm going to go in here and I'm going to give myself the hardness of about, I feel like 60 is good. Let's try 60. So if the edges are too blurry, then it doesn't quite work because fingernails have hard edges. So let's go in and see how that looks. looks. Okay, all right. I'm not mad at this. I'm just going to paint them all, and then I'm going to back out and see what it looks like. Okay, let's back it. Ooh, that looks so much better. It's like a wine color, which I am completely fine with at this point. So I'm not going to keep working on that. I'm just going to flatten that layer. I feel good about it. One of my secrets in retouching is actually a plugin that I use called Portraiture. So I do all of this skin retouching, color correction, color adjustments, and then I use the plugin Portraiture to give me the smoothed skin look that is so common with glamour photography. You can pay for this plugin. You can do a trial of it, I'm sure. Once you install it, it's just under the filter tab here. So I'm going to go to filter, this Imaginomic, which is the company that does Portraiture, and then I'm going to select Portraiture 3, and you'll be able to see in just a moment exactly what it does. These are all like my custom settings for it, and you can fool around with it until it has the look that you want. I've got it selected for a new layer, so it will automatically duplicate the background layer with this adjustment on it. It really just softens the skin, and it'll soften everything else too. So I have to go back in and paint the detail of like the hair, the eyes, the broom, and the rest of the room. So I'm going to go ahead and do that now. I'm going to add a layer mask to this portraiture layer, select my brush, make sure it is at 0% hardness, 100% opacity. I'm going to make the brush larger with the bracket button, and then I'm just going to paint over it. So as I'm using the black brush here, you can see where I'm painting over in this area. And basically, I'm just masking it. I'm taking that portraiture layer off of these detailed areas that I want to be sharper. I will paint over tattoos, like the end of this broom here. I'll go into these little detail spots, make sure that all of that detail stays right where I want it. Eyes, in the lips, and under the nose. I'll hit the dash or the slash button here to show me where all I painted. I feel like that's pretty good. All right. So the portraiture tool, the portraiture plugin is a really handy retouching tool that if you really start getting into doing more skin retouching, it's worth it. I'm not sure how much it is, but you could just look up Imaginomic Portraiture. Okay, so I'm going to flatten. This looks good to me. I'm going to hit Command S, and that is saving my image in Lightroom. So I'm going to open up Lightroom here. So while we're waiting for this image to save in Lightroom, why don't we back up to the very beginning and do a little before and after. I mean, wow. It's really cool, right? I mean, before, this is a great shot. It just needed to be retouched. You know, everything from the catch light in the eyes to removing blemishes, under eye circles, fixing the hairline, you know, adjusting the nail color, smoothing the skin, and this is what we get. Okay, now that I have the image in Lightroom, I am going to come over here to my presets to decide what kind of final coloring I want to put on here. So I have a lot of presets. You know, some of these are ones that I've paid for and then adjusted for my own style. Some of them are ones that I've created. I've got different names for them. Some of them are named after my clients or after, you know, like a certain theme that I've done. So I'm going to go to, sometimes I just start at the top and see, and I'll just kind of go through them and see. I want it to look rich. I want it to look luxurious, spooky. I want more detail in those blacks down there. So you can see already that I'm getting more detail in the shadows. I don't really want it to have a vintage look. Ooh, I like that one. That one looks nice. I like this one too. Lots of detail coming in on that. I think I like that one better. Let's see. Yeah, I really like all that detail coming in on the shadows here. I like how this one really takes my skin to that like luminous pale color. I think I found it though with that double IPA. Really has the look I'm going for. Save it, and then I'm gonna post it. Just gonna save it to my desktop for now. Give it just a moment. Here we go. Oh wow. Yeah, I'm super pleased with how that turned out. Let's do a little before and after. Thank you so much for listening and learning from Lessons with Law Photography. Again, my name is Stephanie May, and I do very much appreciate your patronage through Patreon. Stay tuned for October's lesson and sound off in the comments if you have a specific request for what you would like for me to cover next.